I'm Imam Ahmed Hassan, 52 years old. On November 1st, 2025, I died for 8 minutes during Friday prayers. What Jesus revealed to me about November 18th will shatter everything you believe about prophecy and faith. This is my testimony, and in 17 days, you'll witness the proof. For 30 years, I served as Imam at Masjid al Nur. I held a PhD in Islamic Studies from Al Azhar University. I led over 2,000 faithful Muslims in prayer and never missed a single prayer in 25 years. Before you dismiss this, ask yourself this question: what would make a devoted Imam risk everything to share this message? November 1st, 2025 started like every other Friday for the past 30 years. I woke at 4:30 a.m. for Fajr prayer, recited my morning dhikr, and prepared for what would be my final day as Imam Ahmed Hassan. The irony wasn't lost on me later that the day I died was the day I truly began to live. At 1:15 p.m., I stood before 847 faithful Muslims gathered for Jumu'ah prayers at Masjid al-Nur. These were my people, my spiritual children. I had baptized their babies, officiated their weddings, and comforted them through countless funerals. They trusted me completely with their souls, and I carried that responsibility like a sacred weight. I began the khutbah with verses from Surah Al-Baqarah about Allah's mercy and guidance. My voice echoed through the mosque as it had thousands of times before. The congregation was perfectly still, hanging on every word as I explained the importance of seeking Allah's face in all circumstances. I felt strong, spiritually connected, completely in my element as their shepherd. When we moved to the actual prayer, I led them through the opening takbir. Allahu Akbar, we declared in unison, and I felt that familiar surge of spiritual power that came from leading hundreds of souls in worship. We moved through the movements together, a sea of devotion flowing as one. I was in the middle of reciting Surah Al-Fatiha when it happened. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, I began, and then suddenly a crushing pain exploded across my chest. It felt like someone had placed a massive stone on my heart and was pressing down with supernatural force. The Arabic words died in my throat as I gasped for air that wouldn't come. The pain was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It radiated down my left arm and up into my jaw. My vision began to blur around the edges, and I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, irregular and frantic. I tried to continue the prayer, but my knees buckled beneath me. I collapsed right there on the mihrab, in front of everyone who looked to me for spiritual strength. The last thing I heard as Imam Ahmed was the collective gasp of my congregation, followed by shouts of "Call an ambulance" and "Someone help him." My wife Fatima's scream cut through everything else, a sound of pure terror that I will never forget. The paramedics arrived within 4 minutes. I know this because I was watching from above as they burst through the mosque doors with their equipment. Yes, watching from above. One moment I was on the prayer rug, drowning in pain, and the next I was floating near the ceiling, looking down at my own lifeless body. It was the strangest sensation, like being in two places at once, but only really existing in one. I could see everything with perfect clarity. My body looked so small and frail lying there, nothing like the strong spiritual leader I had always imagined myself to be. The paramedics worked with professional efficiency, checking vitals, preparing equipment, starting CPR. At 1:47 p.m., my heart stopped completely. The monitor showed a flat line that would continue for exactly 8 minutes and 23 seconds. I watched them use the defibrillator 6 times. Each shock made my body jump like a rag doll, but the line remained flat. My wife was crying. My sons were calling my name, but I couldn't return to them. Something was holding me in this in-between space. Have you ever felt completely certain about something, only to discover you knew nothing at all? That's what happened as the darkness began to give way to a distant light. This wasn't the Islamic paradise I had preached about for 3 decades. This was something else entirely, and it would change everything I thought I knew about God, faith, and eternity itself. The sensation of being pulled through water gave way to something I can only describe as traveling through liquid light. There was no tunnel like people often describe in near-death experiences. Instead, I felt myself moving through layers of existence, each one more brilliant and pure than the last. The sound of rushing wind surrounded me, but it carried melodies I had never heard, harmonies that seemed to speak directly to my soul. When the movement stopped, I found myself standing in a place that defied every expectation I had built over 5 decades of Islamic study and practice. This wasn't Jannah as described in the Quran. There were no rivers of milk and honey, no palatial gardens, no huris waiting to serve the faithful. Instead, I stood in what appeared to be a vast space filled with gentle, warm light that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then I saw him. Standing before me was a figure I had denied my entire life, a person I had taught my congregation was merely a prophet, not divine. Jesus Christ stood there with arms outstretched, and the light I had been experiencing was flowing from his very being. He was exactly as Christians had always depicted him, yet somehow more real, more present, more loving than any artistic representation could capture. My first reaction was pure theological panic. Every fiber of my Islamic training screamed in protest. This couldn't be happening. This was Isa ibn Maryam, a respected prophet. Yes, but not God incarnate, not the divine Son that Christians claimed. I had spent 30 years teaching against this very concept, explaining to my congregation why Christian theology was fundamentally flawed. But I am Muslim, I cried out, my voice echoing in that space of pure light. You are not my God. I have served Allah faithfully all my life. I have prayed 5 times daily, fasted during Ramadan, made Hajj 3 times. This cannot be real. His response changed everything. When Jesus spoke, his voice carried the same authority I had always attributed to Allah, but it was filled with such tenderness and love that my theological arguments crumbled before they could fully form. Ahmed, my faithful servant, he said, and somehow he was speaking Arabic, the language of my prayers, the language of the Quran itself. Your devotion has been seen and honored. I am not here to condemn your faith, but to complete your understanding. The words hit me like a revelation. Complete my understanding. Not destroy, not replace, but complete. He continued, the same God you have served as Allah, I serve as Father. We are not different. God's Ahmed, we are one God revealing himself through different doors to reach his children. I stared at the wounds in his hands and feet, wounds that should have healed if he were merely a prophet who had survived crucifixion, as some Islamic scholars claimed. But these wounds were glorious, radiating light and power. They weren't signs of defeat, but of ultimate victory over death itself. In that moment, every verse of the Quran about Isa ibn Maryam suddenly made perfect sense, but from a completely different perspective. The virgin birth, The miracles, the claim that Allah raised him up, even the mysterious verses about the day of judgment when Isa would return. They weren't contradicting Christian theology. They were confirming it in ways I had been too bound by tradition to understand. Look inside your own heart right now. Have you ever had a moment when everything you believed was turned completely upside down, yet somehow it all made more sense than it ever had before? That's what was happening to me in the presence of Jesus Christ. But he wasn't finished with me yet. Jesus gestured toward what appeared to be a massive window into space itself, showing me the earth as if from a great height. I could see the entire North American continent spread out below us, weather systems swirling across its surface like living things. Ahmed, he said, I will give you a sign for both your Muslim brothers and Christian sisters. A sign that will prove this encounter is real and that will prepare hearts for what is coming. Jesus pointed to the swirling weather systems below us, and suddenly I could see everything with supernatural clarity. It was as if I had been given the eyes of a meteorologist, combined with divine insight into the very mechanics of creation itself. The Earth's atmosphere became transparent to me, revealing patterns and movements that would unfold over the coming weeks. On November 18th, exactly 17 days from your return, Jesus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who commands the very elements, watch the skies over the United States. What you are about to see will serve as proof that this encounter is real and that I am who I claim to be. I watched in amazement as he showed me the formation of multiple low-pressure systems that would develop over the Ohio Valley. The vision was incredibly detailed, like watching a time-lapse movie of atmospheric dynamics. I could see cloud cover stretching from the Gulf Coast all the way through Ohio, creating a massive weather system that would bring heavy rainfall and localized flooding to regions that weren't expecting it. Look closely at the jet stream, Jesus instructed, and I could suddenly see this invisible river of air that controls so much of North America's weather. Right now, as you died and came to me, the jet stream is strong across the northern plains. But watch what happens on November 18th. The jet stream before me began to shift and change. What had been a relatively straight flow from west to east suddenly developed a dramatic dip, plunging southward across Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska. This wasn't a gradual change, but a sudden, dramatic shift that would catch weather forecasters off guard. This dip in the jet stream will pull Arctic air masses far south, Jesus explained, creating the most significant temperature drop the Northeast has seen this early in the season. Temperatures will plummet 15 to 25 degrees below normal across the entire region. I watched the cold air mass descend like a blanket being pulled across the continent. Areas that should have been experiencing mild November weather would suddenly feel the grip of early winter. The temperature maps Jesus was showing me were shocking. Cities that normally saw highs in the 60s and 70s in mid-November would struggle to reach the 40s and 50s. But the cold air is only part of the sign. Jesus continued, watch the northern plains and upper Midwest. What I saw next took my breath away. Snow began falling across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. Not just a light dusting, but the first significant snowfall of the season. Some areas would receive several inches, marking the true beginning of winter for millions of people. For many in these regions, November 18th will bring their first snowfall of the year, Jesus said. This will be earlier and more substantial than meteorologists are currently predicting. the vision expanded to show me the severe weather component of this system. Along the boundary where the cold Arctic air met the warmer air masses, I could see the formation of powerful thunderstorms. The Ohio Valley would experience not just rain, but isolated severe weather, including the possibility of tornadoes, damaging winds, and large hail. The contrast between the air masses will create significant instability, Jesus explained. What appears to be a simple cold front will actually be a complex weather system capable of producing severe storms. Then he showed me something that made the prophecy even more specific and verifiable. I could see freezing temperatures reaching as far south as central Mississippi. Areas near the Gulf Coast that rarely experienced frost in November would wake up to temperatures in the mid-30s. Ahmed, this is not typical November weather, Jesus said. When this happens, exactly as I am showing you, people will know that your testimony comes from divine revelation, not human imagination. So I'm asking you, just as a spiritual father would ask his children, are you prepared to witness the impossible? Because what Jesus was showing me wasn't just unusual weather. It was a demonstration of divine power over creation itself, timed to the exact day to validate everything he was about to reveal to me about faith, prophecy, and the future of both Christian and Muslim communities. The meteorological details were so precise, so specific, that there would be no room for a coincidence when November 18th arrived. The vision Jesus was showing me expanded beyond November 18th, revealing a winter pattern unlike anything meteorologists were currently predicting. I could see the entire seasonal progression as if watching months of weather compressed into minutes of divine revelation. This November 18th event is only the beginning, Ahmed. Jesus said, his voice carrying both warning and promise. What I am about to show you will be the most active winter pattern the United States has experienced in decades. I watched as multiple storm systems developed throughout late November and December. The pattern was relentless, with one weather system after another moving across the continent. By Thanksgiving, massive lake effect snow machines would dominate the Great Lakes region, producing snowfall totals that would break records in cities like Buffalo, Cleveland, and Grand Rapids. December will bring historic snowfall events across the lower 48 states. Jesus continued, showing me blizzards that would impact areas not typically associated with heavy snow. The same jet stream pattern that creates the November 18th event will persist, allowing Arctic air to have a direct path southward. The vision was breathtaking in its scope. I could see the Rocky Mountains receiving increased storm activity that would affect the entire western United States. Snow would fall in areas that hadn't seen significant accumulation in years. The meteorological mechanics Jesus was revealing to me showed high-pressure systems building across the Ohio Valley, creating a highway for cold air masses to travel much further south than normal. Then Jesus revealed something that gave me chills beyond the weather itself. November 8th through 15th will be unusually quiet meteorologically, he said. This calm period before November 18th is intentional. The sudden pattern change will be more dramatic and noticeable because of the contrast. I realized that weather forecasters would be caught off guard by how quickly the pattern would shift. 1 week would be relatively peaceful, and then suddenly the most active weather pattern in decades would begin. The supernatural timing was unmistakable. But Ahmed, this is not primarily about weather, Jesus said, his expression becoming more intense. As farmers harvest crops before winter, I'm harvesting souls. The cold weather will drive people indoors, creating opportunities for spiritual reflection that wouldn't exist otherwise. The deeper meaning began to unfold before me. I saw people gathering in homes, families spending more time together because of the harsh winter conditions. Churches and even mosques would see increased attendance as people sought comfort and meaning during the challenging weather. The physical storms would create a spiritual hunger that had been dormant in many hearts. Many will turn to prayer during these harsh winter conditions, Jesus explained. Both Christians and Muslims will seek God more earnestly when faced with the raw power of creation unleashed. Then came the commission that would change my life forever. Ahmed, you will help others understand that sincere seeking matters more than religious labels. Your Muslim background and Christian revelation will open doors that others cannot open. I understood that my unique position as a former Imam who had encountered Jesus would allow me to speak to both communities in ways that traditional Christian evangelists could not. But Jesus warned me about the resistance I would face. Many will resist this message because it challenges their understanding. He said, some Christians will doubt because you were Muslim. Some Muslims will reject because you now follow me. But the weather will speak louder than human opinions. The vision showed me religious leaders from both faiths eventually coming together as the reality of divine intervention became undeniable. November 18th would establish credibility that would open hearts to deeper spiritual truths. When November 18th proves accurate, people will listen to the deeper message. Jesus assured me. Share the weather prophecy first. It will establish that this testimony comes from divine revelation. Ask yourself this question. What will it take for you to recognize God's voice in the storm? Because Jesus was revealing that November 18th would begin a 3-year period of increased spiritual activity across the globe. Natural disasters and weather events would increase in frequency and intensity, not as punishment, but as invitation. Creation itself would be calling humanity back to their Creator. The ultimate purpose became clear. This wasn't about proving meteorological knowledge, but about demonstrating that the same God who controls the weather desires a personal relationship with every human heart, regardless of the religious tradition that first introduced them to divine truth. Jesus placed his hands on my shoulders, and I felt power flowing through me, unlike anything I had ever experienced in 30 years of Islamic prayer and meditation. His touch was both gentle and overwhelming, like being embraced by divine love itself. Your time here is finished, Ahmed, he said, but your mission on earth has just begun. Return with this message. The weather will prove the truth, but the truth is far greater than the weather. The sensation of leaving that place was like being pulled through layers of reality in reverse. I felt myself traveling back through the liquid light, back through the dimensions of existence, back toward the physical realm where my body lay lifeless on a hospital gurney. The transition was jarring, like being yanked from the most beautiful dream into harsh reality. Suddenly, I was slamming back into my body during what I later learned was the 7th defibrillation attempt. The shock that brought me back felt like lightning coursing through every cell. My chest burned from the repeated electrical jolts, and my lungs felt like they were on fire as they desperately tried to remember how to breathe. The heart monitor showed sinus rhythm at 2:55 p.m. I had been clinically dead for exactly 8 minutes and 23 seconds, but to me, it felt like I had spent hours in the presence of Christ. The medical team was stunned. Dr. Sarah Chen, the emergency physician, later told me that in 30 years of practice, she had never seen someone return to life so suddenly after being flatlined for so long. My first words back shocked everyone in that room, including myself. "Jesus," I gasped, my voice hoarse and barely audible. Jesus showed me. November 18th. The storms are coming. The words that came out of my mouth terrified me as much as they terrified the medical staff. Here I was, Imam Ahmed Hassan, speaking about Jesus Christ as if I had just had a personal conversation with him. The paramedic who had been performing CPR actually stepped back, his face pale with confusion. Have you ever returned from a trip with news so shocking that no one wanted to believe it? That's exactly what happened in that emergency room. Dr. Chen immediately began asking me questions to assess potential brain damage from oxygen deprivation. But my responses were clear, detailed, and completely lucid. I wasn't confused or disoriented. I was transformed. My wife Fatima burst into tears when she heard me speaking about Jesus. "Ahmed, what about Allah?" she cried, grabbing my hand. "What about our faith? What about everything we've taught our children?" The pain in her voice cut through me, deeper than the physical pain from my heart attack. How do you explain to your Islamic family that Jesus Christ is Lord? How do you tell the woman you've been married to for 28 years that everything you've believed and taught together has been incomplete? Within hours, news of my death and miraculous revival had spread throughout our Muslim community. Brothers in faith began arriving at the hospital, expecting to celebrate Allah's mercy in bringing their beloved Imam back to life. Instead, they found me speaking about weather prophecies given to me by Jesus Christ. Brother Mahmoud, who had been my closest friend for 15 years, took me aside and whispered urgently, "Ahmed, you've suffered brain damage from lack of oxygen. This is not Islam. This is not the teaching we've shared together. You need to stop speaking this way before the community loses faith in your leadership." But I couldn't stop. The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. For 6 hours straight, I frantically wrote down every detail Jesus had shown me about the weather patterns. Specific dates, exact temperature drops, geographical locations, storm formations, snowfall amounts. The hospital staff thought I was having religious delusions, but the meteorological precision of what I was documenting was unlike anything a brain-damaged person could fabricate. Dr. Chen ordered a complete psychiatric evaluation because of my dramatic personality change. All the brain scans came back normal. Medically, I was perfectly healthy. Spiritually, I had become a completely different person, and there was no medical explanation for the transformation. They could examine my brain, but they couldn't examine my soul. 2 days after my return from death, I knew I had to make the most difficult decision of my life. On November 3rd, 2025, I stood before the congregation of Masjid al-Nur for what I knew would be the last time as their Imam. These 847 faithful Muslims had trusted me with their spiritual lives for 3 decades. They deserved to hear the truth directly from me, regardless of the consequences. My hands trembled as I approached the mihrab where I had collapsed just 2 days earlier. The same spot where I had died was now where I would declare my spiritual rebirth. The irony wasn't lost on me that the place of my physical death would become the place of my ministry's death as well. "Brothers and sisters," I began, my voice echoing through the mosque one final time. "As their spiritual leader, I must share with you what Allah, what Jesus Christ, revealed to me during my time beyond the veil of death. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the shock and confusion spreading across familiar faces. People who had known me as a devoted Muslim for decades. My own son, Khalil, was in the front row. His expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. I have encountered Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus Christ, and he has shown me that he is indeed the Son of God, the Savior that Christians proclaim him to be. My voice grew stronger with each word, even as I watched hearts breaking before my eyes. I am no longer your Imam. I am now a follower of Jesus Christ. The explosion of voices that followed was immediate and overwhelming. Shouts of Astaghfirullah and "This is blasphemy" filled the mosque. Several men stood up and walked out immediately. My wife, Fatima, buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. But I pressed on, driven by a conviction that burned stronger than my fear of rejection. Within hours of my public declaration, I was removed from all mosque responsibilities. 30 years of Islamic leadership ended in a single moment of truth-telling. The mosque board convened an emergency meeting and unanimously voted to terminate my position. I lost my salary, my office, my title, and most painfully, my spiritual family. The personal cost was devastating. My wife, Fatima, filed for divorce within a week, telling me through tears, "I cannot be married to a Christian. You have betrayed everything we built together." Our 28-year marriage, which had survived every challenge life threw at us, couldn't survive my encounter with Jesus. My daughter Amina moved out of our house, refusing to speak to me. "You've betrayed everything we believe, Baba," she said, using the childhood name that now felt like a knife in my heart. How can I respect a father who abandoned his faith? But my son Khalil surprised me. "Father," he said quietly after the others had left, "I saw your face when you returned from death. Something divine happened to you. I may not understand it yet, but I believe you experienced something real. Following Jesus cost me everything I loved in this world, but I gained something infinitely more valuable. I gained eternity, and I gained a mission that burns within me like holy fire." On November 5th, I began my new ministry, reaching out to both Muslim and Christian communities with the message Jesus had given me. The November 18th prophecy became my calling card, the proof that would establish credibility for the deeper spiritual truths I needed to share. Today is November 4th. In exactly 14 days, everything Jesus showed me will be verified. I've been watching weather forecasts with anticipation and prayer, and already meteorologists are beginning to mention unusual patterns developing for mid-November. Current forecasters are noting potential for significant weather changes, though they don't yet understand the supernatural precision of what's coming. Look inside your own heart right now. Can you feel something changing in the spiritual atmosphere? November 18th isn't just about weather. It's about God breaking through human expectations and religious boundaries to reach hearts that are hungry for truth. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead raised me from that hospital bed. When November 18th arrives and those storm systems form exactly as Jesus showed me, when temperatures drop precisely 15 to 25 degrees below normal in the Northeast, when the first significant snowfall hits Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas, you will know that this testimony comes from the God of all creation. Whether you call him Allah, Jesus, or are still searching for truth, don't wait for your own near-death experience to recognize his voice. The storms coming aren't just meteorological, they're spiritual. So I'm asking you, just as a spiritual father would ask his children, are you ready for the harvest that's coming?